we'll now move into the panel session. And I would like to introduce our panelists. So we'll be having three panelists that are coming from different fields. So we'll have Mr. Stephen Kakooza, who is a Ugandan public health microbiologist, currently working with VSF Germany and the BMZ funded project called Boosting Uganda's Investments in Livestock Development. So he combines past experiences working with the various One Health teams and guidance from the past and current build mentors to deliver technical support to research for livestock development agenda in Uganda. Our second panelist is Dr. Sentamu Derrick, who is a veterinarian by profession with a Master's in Science in Veterinary Public Health. He is a graduate fellow at the International Livestock Research Institute, and he is deeply interested in zoonoses and food safety. However, he believes the foundation to these fields is animal welfare. Our third panelist is Mrs. Christine Alokit, who is an agricultural professional with a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, majoring in Agricultural Extension Education from Makerere University, and a Master's of Science in Agricultural Development Economics from the University of Reading in the UK. She currently works with CABI, based at the Uganda office, as a communication and extension scientist in charge of providing leadership, coordination, and overseeing implementation of CABI projects in Uganda. So you're welcome, our panelists, and our panelists will be taking us through their positions based on the conclusions that I have given above and the recommendations. And I also expect them to give us a bit of their experience regarding welfare of animals that they have encountered in their projects, and to discuss the need for welfare assessment in their projects, as well as giving us their general experience. You're welcome, our panelists. I'll start with Stephen Kakooza. Please take the floor.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul, for your presentation. Quite insightful and a lot of detail and findings that we were able to get. So the basis for animal welfare, from my point of view, comes actually from the significance of animals which are kept in society for different roles. And on these various, based on the roles of animals, looking at those that are providing food for us, then there are pets and wildlife that come in usually for tourism. I have been able to serve on projects working on antimicrobial resistance and zoonoses, that is in food animals, and how welfare is really impacting food safety. The results are quite interesting, and what is important is that majority of the strategic policy and planning documents do not actually point it out clearly how we can be able to integrate animal welfare into food safety plans and other efforts. For the works that I've done in pets, there are quite of efforts, a number of efforts to promote animal welfare. However, I've realized there are a number of issues which are actually coming because in the desire to promote welfare, some of the efforts promote welfare, but they may have public health impact. For example, in Uganda, there is quite a problem of antimicrobial resistance, and it stems also from a point that we do not have drugs on the market. The access to drugs is limited. So these people will use human antibiotics to treat bacterial conditions of pets. So this becomes an issue that people are really trying to do welfare for these animals to prevent disease and control disease, but there are impacts that they're doing it the wrong way. So there is really a need for welfare to be incorporated on a number of projects, be it in food animals and pets or in wildlife. I would just want to conclude that based on the assessment that Paul has done, we all see that there is a need for us to input assessment exercises in all the things that we do, because assessment is important. Once you do not have a baseline, then you cannot have the evidence to have your intervention. So in the projects that are upcoming, based on the exposure and guidance from WTS and also Paul, we plan to actually do assessments in pigs so that we are able to see how we can have evidence-based interventions. Yeah, over to you, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. That was very clear and very elaborate. I would like to invite Mrs. Christine Alokit from CABI. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Paul, and the WTS for organizing this. Thank you for the presentation, very informative. And as Stephen has just elaborated, I would just like to add on that. You find that the aspects of animal welfare, first, the smallholder farmers are the vast majority in sub-Saharan Africa, but these keep crops and they keep livestock. They also have pets. And you find that that actually forms a significant part of the national food basket. So their contribution is very big, but also looking at the different categories of these farmers. You did a study in Chirohura, which is more like a high level dairy area. But if you move across the country, you'll actually find that farmers keep ruminants, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 small size of animals, but mixed. There are some goats, some chickens, there are pigs, and everything in small numbers. So this assessment is very good, and I like your conclusions, because specifically if we have to adapt this, we need to look at, make it pragmatic so that it can be able to handle the various production systems, but also should be taken into consideration the specific constraints of the farmers, the resource envelope, the personnel, the management system, because if we make it very tight and make it too general, then you'll find that many of these farmers are left out. And remember that the animals are actually a live bank, which farmers depend on for their source of livelihood. So if they are left out or is too stringent, then you'll find that that will affect the economy and the general livelihood in a very difficult manner. And then specifically as CABI, we are leading national partners from 4 districts in central Uganda and working together with the ministry. We are implementing a pilot project, joint crop livestock advisory services for smallholder farmers. And this project is actually exploring what are the benefits of bringing the animal health and the crop health people together to advise farmers, but also looking at what are the benefits with regard to cost efficiency and the dependence, the farmer knowledge and awareness of the interdependence of the crop productivity and the animals together, because farmers generally keep this together. So we are piloting this, and the farmers bring their animals and crops to what we call the joint crop livestock consultation centers or clinics, whichever you may want to call them. And from our records that we have actually seen so far, from when we started way back in January, you find that the top animals that are brought in are cattle, pigs, goats, chickens. Then we also have others like turkeys or rabbits. But then farmers actually bring in pets as well into these clinics. But the animal health staff have to follow up and actually visit them on the advice that they've given them based on that. And I would like really to say that, the animal welfare is a very integral part of the management system of animals. And if we are talking about food safety for all of us, but also be able to serve as many farmers as possible, this assessment is very important to customize it to the local conditions and see what actually fits in the various management practices in the country so that it does not become too stringent on the farmers. But also these joint crop livestock centers we find that are very key in the dissemination of information to the farmers on the animal management. Farmers come and asking questions on how do I build a shelter for my cow, or my animals are not feeding, or issues about the feeds, the feeding, the health, the housing. So this is a very key center that this information can be captured, and then we can together actually plan out how do we reach out to these farmers with more information, but also be able to sensitize farmers beyond those who actually come to those joint clinics, because you are able to check out from the data and see how many queries are actually on which side of the animal management aspect. So this is a necessary assessment. And of course, taking it into policy is very, very necessary, because once this is taken up into policy, the challenges of how do we reach all the farmers can be halfway somewhere, because if it becomes part of the policy system, then more districts are actually able to take in the information, but also to build the capacity of the frontline extension on the animal welfare criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. You have really given us very good light. You have added more light on how this protocol can be further assimilated into the different communities. At this point, let me welcome Dr. Derrick Sentamu, sorry, to also give his input on this. You're welcome, Derrick.
Thank you very much. Am I audible enough?
Sorry?
Am I audible enough?
Yeah, maybe you raise your mic closer.
Okay, how about now?
Perfect. Please continue.
Okay. Yeah, first off, I would like to thank you, Doctor, and WTS for the work well done in coming up with these results. I know research is usually a very long process, but thank you very much for the work well done. Secondly, I would also want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be a panelist in this very important discussion. So for the first question about my position regarding with the recommendations and conclusions that you made, I personally think that, and I completely agree with the conclusions from the study. However, I also want to make strong points that you raise in your conclusions. Well, your conclusion states that with modifications and exclusions from these international standards that are set, it highlights that even we as indigenous people, we can still maintain welfare of our animals, even in indigenous systems. So I think that is a strong point that is raised in, the way you carried out your research and also in your conclusions. But however, it also helps Ugandans and all East Africans know that animal welfare is not a foreign concept. Animal welfare is something that we live with every day. We know the number of animals that, that we have in East Africa, probably second in the entire continent. And this is a topic, or this is a field that really needs attention, not only by academics, but also by the farmer himself at the ground level. So I like that your research went down to these farms to get to know what really happens and to also advise accordingly on how things have to be changed. And then thirdly, one of the strong things that is raised by your research is that we can have, as East Africans, as Africans, we can have self-generated solutions to the problems that we face. So having specialists like Dr. Ssuna, specialists like, Kakooza, Stephen, and Christine, go out and understand, or even they were born and bred in these systems. So given that they now understand the concept of animal welfare, they're able to assess and digest and know that, these are the changes that have to be made to make sure that our animals are reared better. And we all know that if animals are treated better, we'll have, better productivity from our animals, which is a central core to, the policies that especially the government of Uganda sets. So I like that your research raises those three important points. One, that we can have self-generated solutions. Two, that it educates and informs local people that animal welfare is possible. It's not a foreign concept. And that comes from the third point, as much as we can modify and exclude some of the things that we have in most of the international standards that are set. Then secondly, we're requested to say a little about the work we've done regarding animal welfare. So personally, my master's research was in animal welfare, trying to assess the prevalence of welfare lesions and associated practices, and how these lesions and practices are associated with meat quality. And this study was done in pigs at a certain non-integrated abattoir within Kiambu County in Nairobi. I will just list 5 major findings that we found. Of course, we looked at these pigs at the point of slaughter. So one of the challenges we found that pigs were poorly stunned. We had 99% of the pigs being poorly stunned. This means that these animals will then be slaughtered while they are still alive. Secondly, we found that 77% of our pigs were marked with very sharp objects on the ears with initials of the owners, just because they want to follow them through the slaughter line. I think we don't need to explain that this is a breach of animal welfare. And then thirdly, which I know is also common in Uganda, because I'm a Ugandan, many pigs were being transported to the abattoir using boda-bodas and bicycles. We all know that this is wrong. It exposes these animals to fractures. The stress that they get while being carried like this is untold. But ultimately, it's going to affect the meat that you're going to harvest. And then fourthly, we found that there were people that were buying pigs and keeping them for over 24 hours. That is 24, 48 hours. And, after such a lengthy period, then they can take them to be slaughtered. We know that during that period, these traders are not feeding the animals. They are not providing them with water. They are probably not being housed well. And this is a breach to welfare of animals. And then lastly, one of the major findings was there was very high loading density of the pigs. You could find people transporting pigs in very small cars, a car that is supposed to be for personal use, driving you from home to office. A trader is using it to transport 10 pigs to the slaughterhouse. So that was my research, and those are a few of the findings. And then the other question was, why is welfare assessment important in the project? So allow me to customize this to my project, given that it was at abattoir level. This assessment is important because, well, one, it reminds all stakeholders, especially at the abattoir level. It's an important point. It's a convergent point for most of the stakeholders in livestock value chains. So if we have our meat inspectors speaking about the same issue, if we have our veterinary inspectors, managers of the abattoir, raising issues about animal welfare, engaging all these stakeholders about how they transport the animals, how they stand them, and also having a way of assessing how this is done, I believe it would be a great education point for most of these stakeholders. But however, it's also important to know, especially at abattoir level, that intrinsic to the definition of animal welfare, which refers to the physical and mental state of an animal in relation to the conditions in which it lives and dies. This is important. How an animal dies is important. You know, you're not going to just come and slaughter an animal without stunning it. We all know that if it were a human being, that would be a lot of pain. So assessment of how such things are done is really important. And still at abattoir level, the way you treat an animal is going to affect the kind of meat that you're going to vest. And then again, we're asked to share challenges to this assessment. On a personal level, I think one of the major challenges to this assessment, generally animal welfare, is a lack of basic knowledge about what animal welfare is. Dr. Paul was a colleague, we studied together at Makerere University, but I can testify that as a vet, I got to learn about animal welfare in my third year. I did not know much about this concept. So imagine if as a vet, I get to learn about this very important concept at that level. How about the farmer that is down there in the village? How about the trader that is just buying this animal to go and sell it for money? So that is the first challenge, lack of basic knowledge about, animal welfare. People don't know that animals suffer, and they do not have any knowledge about this basic fact. With that, Dr. Paul, please allow me to give back the microphone. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Derrick. That was very, very informative. And thank you very much, our panelists, for those deliberations. Now, at this point in time, I would like us to have some questions from our participants. So I'll check the chat to see if there is any question. Yes, there is a question here from Saul. The question is, in your experience, what are the most effective ways to encourage farmers to pay more attention to animal welfare? And what are the main obstacles to change? So I would first of all give an opportunity to any of the people we are having on our panel, if you would want to comment on that.
I can give an attempt to that. Thank you, Saul, for that question. I think as Derrick pointed out, the main key thing is that we have limited knowledge, but also when you talk about animal welfare, how can we repackage the message of animal welfare to a local, to our local understanding? Because it sounds like when you're talking about animal welfare, you're talking about animals have rights, so I'm not supposed to eat my chicken or do which way. But the way we package that information so that farmers can actually appreciate, and even beyond farmers, the traders and everybody, to appreciate that animal welfare is actually the management, to manage it well, so that, and then we should package that together with what are the benefits. If I apply these animal welfare management practices to my herd or to my animals that are bought for slaughter, what will be the benefit to an individual, but also to the general public? So the benefit should be elaborated in that, so that the people then begin to appreciate the messages in there, and also to actually break down the animal welfare into the small nitty-gritty points that encompass it. Thank you.
Dr. Paul, could I attempt as well?
Yeah, please. Sorry, I went off. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian, for that. So about effective ways to encourage farmers to pay more attention to animal welfare. Well, I'll go back to the point that has been raised still by all the panelists. It's education first. People need to learn what is animal welfare. What are the contents within this concept? We can start with teaching them about the freedoms of animals, and then Dr. Paul educated me a while back about some concepts that are followed while doing animal welfare research. you can be altruistic about it, but also sometimes people look at what they usually get from doing this particular thing. Yeah, so maybe within, you know, the education that we give to the farmers, to the larger family of stakeholders in the livestock chain, we can also let them know which benefits they're likely to get as they, you know, as they carry out this concept of animal welfare. And then it was also raised here, which obstacles, like Christine earlier said, I believe one of the very huge obstacles we have is that we do not have policies. And even if we had them, for example, in the Kenyan context, there is very little enforcement of these policies that regard animal welfare. And also the ones that are existent, most of the times you will find them obsolete. For example, you look at the penalties that are given in contravention to these policies, and you know, they're really unserious and ridiculous. So I believe policies is one of the major obstacles that we have in this campaign for animal welfare. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Derrick. Maybe Stephen, you have done some research on nudges. Would you want to comment on how we can use nudges to change farmer behavior?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and actually thank you, Christine and Derrick have actually spoken about key interventions that are important, but focusing on education, I think most of the sensitization programs have an issue is to relay the information to a layman. How best can you be able to relay this information? Sorry, I think I can't. I could just type my responses in the chat because there's something passing by here which is making a lot of noise.
Thank you, Stephen. We'll get back to you. I think you have some interference in the background. I don't know, we are actually running out of time. I would want to, at this point, to invite our experts once again to give us their take-home messages that our participants can go with from this particular webinar. And for the rest of the questions, we are going to note them down, and we will type the responses and share them on the WTS portal. So you can access your responses from there later on. So, you know, I'll start with myself. So the take-home message I would have for our participants is that it is time that we consider assessment of welfare of animals as an important aspect in the projects that we are running in the different areas. So for all those project managers who are having projects involving animals, there are those that give out animals to people. There are those that are doing research, keeping animals for experimental studies. So it is very, very key and very, very important to have welfare assessment as part of the tools that are done routinely for those animals, that are used routinely for those animals to ensure that their welfare is not compromised under these projects, and also to ensure success of these projects, because animal welfare affects the impact and the success of these projects. Any of the panelists who is ready, you can give, you can open your mic and give your take-home message as we prepare to conclude.
I'll just jump in, Paul. Thank you very much. My take-home message here is, but we need to demystify animal welfare to our local context. And then within that, we need to be able to identify and sensitize all stakeholders along these value chains of the various animals, and slowly by slowly, but also to see how best to work with the various stakeholders, frontline extension, research, to package these messages, but also to integrate these animal welfare component into policy so that slowly then it gets implemented across board. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Any other panelists? Derrick, Dr. Derrick, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah,
I was
please.
typing
Your take-home message.
Caroline.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, my take-home message is simple. Well, Dr. Paul focused on work at farm level. Then my work focused on abattoir level. So I'd like to pose this question to all people who have graced us with their presence in this webinar, in their capacities, and ask them how, wherever you work, wherever you live, how are you able to assess the welfare of those animals that you have? And if it is good or bad, what can you do about it? What can you do to improve? That is a question we all need to ask ourselves. And remember that this is not something we're going to wait for, someone from Mars to help us do, but it starts with individual responsibility. And then secondly, my take-home message will be to Paul and WTS. Just like Christine earlier said, we need to make sure that we follow up our research into policy. We need to engage policymakers, because then we'll have our change done on a wider scale than if we just publish these papers. So please consider engagement of policymakers. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Derrick. And, Stephen is still having some interference, but he said in his message, he says that animal welfare is an undermined priority in majority of agricultural systems. So we need to do assessments to detect problems, address them, and also to use the data for interventional activities to reverse the detrimental outcomes. Thank you, Stephen, for that. So thank you so much. I would like now to invite Karin to give the closing remarks and close this webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you